like to clarify that the video series I'm starting Wednesday is, Beth said it's 9-part, and it is. We're doing not all 9 parts in one night, so don't get nervous. Each part is 30 minutes, and it follows my book pretty well. I did not duplicate the first 2 chapters or this second and third chapters, I guess, on Jesus and the Fillmorian influence, but I have included the ideas in those chapters under a couple of headings: the body-soul connection, part 1 and part 2. So I think you'll enjoy it. I'm, as I said a couple of weeks ago, I'm building a website around it, so I'm making this series available to other churches and individuals out there. But I've been working on it for, I think it took about a year to complete the whole thing. It's a pretty involved process, and that's what's kind of interesting. It's like writing a book. You know, you can read a book in a couple of days, and it can take up, my novel took 6 years to write. So somebody said, when will you have the sequel? Like next week? No. So there's a lot that goes into it, but this, the book, The Complete Soul, is, I know it's, for some it's difficult to understand, difficult to follow, and I've had several people, including my mother, say it's way ahead of all of our time. And it's not really. So the video, I think, will help bring it down to earth, and more importantly, we'll have a discussion time. The video lasts about 30 minutes. We'll have a discussion time after that, and we'll say roughly 30 minutes, but I don't think 30 minutes will be enough time. But however long it takes, and we won't keep you here all day long, but there's a lot to talk about in it, and I just feel very good about it, but I do understand the difficulty some people have with catching some of the ideas. But just because you don't get it, don't think there's nothing there, because there is. It's a culmination of about 40 years of doing this, and I think I will spend the rest of my life explaining what's in that book. So I feel it represents my understanding of this whole spiritual thing as I have come to after all this time. Okay, and I did not include also sections on meditation and prayer, which I'm going to do a separate series on that from that book, and also from my other book, Meditation and Prayer. So that'll be forthcoming when the world stops turning like it has been. Okay, so the power behind prayer. This is it's a subject that I think we all need to revisit often. And the way I present prayer is as the second half, or the second part of a single process. The first part of that is meditation. And I'll kind of rehash that again. I talked about it a couple weeks ago. But it's a very important aspect to include in our prayer life, because most of us have grown up with the idea that we are here on this earth struggling. We're humans that have all these various problems that we're trying to resolve. And in prayer, we turn to a God, or God. And that God is, as I was raised, up in the sky and listens, but you can't always tell if anything's happening. You can't tell if there's a response. And so it's like a communication, and it's often one way, and we don't know if we've been heard until we see some result from our prayer. So over the years, I've taken a very different approach to this. And in Unity, we focus, put a great deal of emphasis on the practice of meditation. And I've heard people all my life say the same thing about meditation that they've been saying about the complete soul, is I don't know how to do it. I don't get it. And that too is understandable. But meditation is a very natural process, and why we're not able to practice it probably is because we're trying to do something unnatural. It's like we're trying to tie ourselves in a knot in a lotus position or something, and assuming a position that will get us into that deeper awareness. And meditation really has nothing to do with that. You just sit in a chair, or you can walk, or you can, go shopping, be out shopping with your mind coming back to your center. But there needs to be special times where you go within and you know for sure that something in you is opening up, something different. And it can lead to a very profound experience. You read about the mystics, some of the experiences they have. One very good book centers on that is Evelyn Underhill's book, Mysticism. She deals with a number of cases and the processes they go through, some very famous people, some not so famous. But she talks about how they awaken and what happens in them to become aware of this other dimension. It's not just a feel-good state. It is a connection, and knowing, a universal knowing that we are one with something outside of ourselves. And I have told you many times, I had a profound experience in my 20s, and it's the thing that set the course for my life, because it made me realize God is not a theory. God is a reality. And as my mind opened up to this presence, it was the most real thing I've ever experienced in my life, and I have wanted to get back to that. But what I realized is, if I was living in that state of mind all the time, that I probably would not be able to function so well, because nothing else would matter. And that may not make a lot of sense, but when you're experiencing something that is so profound, all you can do is sit there and cry and babble and give thanks. It is difficult to function. And so I think we come down from those high moments, and many of the mystics express this as well, so they can relate to the world. Jesus would go off by himself and probably do this. He'd probably have these very high moments. And then he'd come back down among people, and he'd help, and he'd do what he did. He did not separate himself from the world. And that's the temptation, to pray ourselves out of here, to meditate ourselves out of here, to get to a level where none of this matters and all. But why would we come to a place, take on a body, I think we did, and then try to make it not matter? Try not to be involved. Try to treat it like it's some kind of a disease that we have to separate ourselves from. I don't think that's what it's about. It's about being in this world. And meditation helps us to not be of it. It makes us realize, it opens us to the realization that we're part of something greater than just this individual self. But we live at the surface of ourselves, we live at the surface of our being most of our life. And what meditation does, and also what prayer does, is helps bring us back to that revelation, that realization that we are much more than this problem we have, or this body we have, or this whatever this condition may be. So meditation is an infilling, an inspiration, the breath of the Almighty. Think of it that way. And it's interesting that the word, the Greek word for spirit is pneuma, P-N-U-M-A, like a pneumatic air gun, a pneumatic compressor, air. It's breath, spirit. It's all the same meaning, and there's a very good reason for that, is because you can't see your breath. You can't see the breath, but you feel it. So we say, does God exist? I have never seen God any place. We sent Hubble up there to look around, and it doesn't look like any abode of God up there. Jesus said it's like the wind. It blows, it moves through the trees. You can hear it, you can feel it, but you can't see it. God is spirit, and those who worship God must worship in spirit and in truth. That all makes perfect sense, because the whole idea is it's an invisible thing, but it touches everything that we are engaged in. It is the thing that animates our being. But nobody can see it. Nobody's ever seen you. You think they have, but they haven't. They've seen this body you're running. They've seen the face that your soul smiles through in your eyes. But they've never seen you. That's why Jesus said, if you have seen me, you've seen the Father. The me he was talking about was not the physical person that we're all trying to figure out what he looked like. The me was the me, the I am. If you've seen that, then you've seen the whole. You've seen what I'm talking about. You've seen my source. If you've seen it in me, you of course have seen it in yourself. Flesh and blood, as he said to Peter, didn't reveal this question of who am I that Jesus raised. Who do people say that I am? Peter was the one that said, "Thou art the Son of God, the Son of the living God." Jesus said, flesh and blood didn't reveal that. So we have all these relationships, and so many of them are based on flesh and blood, but you have never actually seen people you know, and the people you know have never seen you. They see what you do. They see the effects of you, just like the leaves blowing in the tree, moving in the tree. You've never seen the air. You've never seen the wind, but you've seen the effects of it. So we're not dealing with an old man in the sky. We're dealing with the breath of God. We're dealing with the inspiration. Meditation is an infilling, the inspiration, a deeper realization that you are grounded in God. And this is not something you can read about and get. You can definitely read about it, but you don't get it. It is an intuitive experience. But when you touch God, when the breath of God touches your conscious mind, you know it. Absolutely no question about it. It'll be the most real thing if you have not experienced it already. So we have this inspiration, we have this infilling. And this is what is left out. It was left out in my early upbringing. The Baptists never talked about meditation. And as I've said before, I used to be on a radio show and would have people call in or write letters. And I talked about meditation one time, and some student wrote in and said the professor said that meditation would make you lose your mind. And I wrote back and said, he's right. You will lose your mind. It's the mind that keeps you pegged on this planet, the mind that keeps you pegged in this body. You will lose that. That's the point. That's the self-image. That's the source of most of our problems, is how we see ourselves and how we see our relationship to God. We separate ourselves from God. So we want to lose that mind. And it's not a negative thing at all. It's something that not many people understand. Do you think the religious industry of Jesus' day understood him? They despised him because he threatened everything they represented. What did they represent? They represented the teaching that you all are down here, separate from God. Come to me and I'll pass on any information you might want to give. Plus I'll give you a whole lot of things God wants you to do to walk the straight and narrow. 600 practices a day, as a matter of fact. So I'm needed. I'm the gate. I'm the way for you to communicate with God. And I grew up in a belief system that said the Bible is that. The Bible is the way. It's the Word of God. And that's commonly taught today. And it's understandable. This is seen as something that was dictated by God to certain individuals and then given to humanity to read and decipher. What's God want me to do? So I search the Scriptures. Jesus said you search the Scriptures, for in them you think you have life. He says they bear witness to the truth of the life that I am. But the Scripture kills. Paul said that. The letter killeth. There's something underneath it. These Scriptures are talking about this wind, this breath of the Almighty that we don't see. It's talking about it, so don't take it literally. You move deeper, you move into, and that's what I think is the genius of Jesus. I have looked at him from a totally different perspective, looked at the teachings attributed to him, I should say. And I know that he was having this inner experience. I know he was trying to tell others about it. I'm not special. We're all special. We're all expressions of God. Somebody called him good teacher. He said, why do you call me good? There's only one that's good. That's God. I think he was a very down-to-earth mystic. He lived with this awareness of his oneness with God, and I think he had to go off and recapture that sometimes. I'm sure he got very tired doing stuff he was doing. He seemed like he was quite busy. So meditation is an infilling, inspiration, a deeper realization that you are grounded in God. Prayer is your means of expressing meditative inspiration through all the specific areas of your life. So that's, it's not an asking. Prayer is not necessarily an asking, although we don't want to just, take a blanket definition of that and say, don't ever ask again, because Jesus said, whatever you ask for in prayer, I believe you've received it. That's extremely important principle. But how do we ask? How do I ask in prayer? It's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's not a, God, please give me something I don't have, because God would say, well, I've given you all that I can. I'm giving you my full self. I'm expressing all that I am through you. All that I have is yours. And you're not seeing it. There's something blocking your vision at this moment. So that's why the meditation side is important. We get the infilling. We experience the breath of God. And then our prayer is to keep our thought, emotion, our attitudes in line with what we experience in that quiet time. It's a twofold process. Prayer is a process of releasing those mental and emotional states that are blocking your good and affirming the truth that unfolds through your quiet times. So you see, it has more to do with you than it does with God. Meditation has everything to do with God, first-hand experience with God. You get this inspiration, and then you go out into your life, somebody says something to you that starts knocking it down. So that's your first opportunity to release, to deny. Are you responding to what they say? Are you believing what they say? Are you feeling worse because of what they say? You stop yourself right there and say, that has nothing to do with this breath of the Almighty. It has nothing to do with this inner awakening. So I let that go. It's not easy to do that. As Paul said, we pray without ceasing. So when you buy into what they say and you allow yourself to drop down to some lower level of experience, that's also prayer. But what you're denying is not the negativity. You're denying the breath of the Almighty. You're denying always. You're affirming and denying something all the time. So prayer is being conscious of what we are denying, what we are affirming. So in a case like that, we say, okay, that's that person's opinion. I don't have to respond to it. I don't have to go down to that level. And you may go down there for a while, and then you grab onto yourself and pull yourself back up by the shirt tail. That's denial. I release that energy. I release that way of thought. I release that reaction. I let that go. And I follow through with, what do I affirm? I remember, I recall the breath of the Almighty, that inspiration, that high level of experience I had in my quiet time. You know how that works. You go off by yourself and you read an inspirational book and it really lifts you up. And then you go out and something, just like I said, happens. The world starts shooting arrows at you. It's just so easy to get caught up in that and to go down with that. So what happened to the book? What happened to the inspiration you got when you're reading the book? Where did it go? That's the breath of the Almighty. And the bigger question is, when will it show up in my life? When will my life start looking like this? When will my life start looking like what I feel when I'm alone reading my book? That's what we want. That's the standard that we're setting. But I'm saying to get it not just from books, that's a good place to start. But we want to have a direct experience with God. We want to experience the thing we're reading about, that is, this oneness with God. Because when you touch that, when it touches your mind will never be the same. It changes you forever. You can't go back to the old way. You will fall in terms of, you'll have negative thoughts, you'll have negative feelings, you'll have anger, you have all the stuff that you would normally have, but you can never forget that high moment, that experience that you had, and you'll come back to it. Again, that's the prodigal son. He goes off into the far country. He never forgets he's got a home. How else would he know to go back? He never forgets. And that's probably always floating in the back of his mind as he's having all the fun. I'm sure he forgets everything. But when things start going south, he starts remembering, home, maybe it wasn't so bad after all. And we turn to this high level, we turn to this inner place, usually in crisis. There's a lot of positive things that happen in our challenges. It makes us look at ourselves in ways we would not do otherwise, possibly. But we don't want negativity to be our motivation. We don't want to catch up, have to fix our life by calling upon God just in our times of problems. We want to open ourselves to that presence and know what we're talking about. Know that God is not a theory. God is a reality. So one way to think of this just kind of came, and it's sort of a crass example, I guess, but if you think of prayer as conducting a job interview for your business, you start this business. What you do, you start a business, that's a thing you have now. And you've got standards. You've got a thing you want to sell, a thing you want to do, a service you want to provide. It's a thing you want to have happen. And so you need employees for this. And you start interviewing employees, and a guy comes to you and you can tell, just wants all the benefits that you offer. You think, well, maybe he's qualified, but we'll see. And you go on to the next one, and next one's similar, or has no experience whatsoever. Third one comes along and really wants to support you in your business, understands what you're doing, understands how difficult it is to start one up and all that. So you say yes to that one, and you say no to the previous two, because they're not going to carry your objective along. That's exactly what happens when you experience an inspiration, and then you go into your life and you get all these things that want your attention. And are you going to hire them, or are you going to fire them? Are you going to let them go? You're going to take them on, or are you going to let them go? That's the question. It's the parable Jesus gave about throwing the net into the sea, taking up fish of every kind, and the fishermen sat down and threw the good ones in a vessel and threw the bad ones back. That's exactly how it works. Throwing the net into the sea, that's meditation. You're taking in, it's the breath of the Almighty. It's a high standard. It's how I want to feel. When you're reading your spiritual book that you like, isn't that how you want to feel all the time? Isn't that why you read it? You go back to it? If you're not feeling so well and you take time to go read your book, it lifts you up. And you want to feel that way all the time. So why don't you? It's because we cast our net into the sea, we feel good for that moment, and then we say no to the good fish. I can't sustain this. I can't live here forever. This is reality, you know. I'm going to have ups and downs. I'm going to have good days and bad days. So these are all ideas that they're so ingrained in us, we don't even realize we're rejecting or accepting these things. So the power behind prayer is to become conscious of that dynamic. Start with a book. Start with something that inspires you in the morning and say, that's my standard for the day. Step out your door, step out your house, and watch what happens. Maybe you step outside, it's cloudy, it's been cloudy for 3 weeks. Unusual in Colorado, although not lately. And you have that kind of response. Is that a good fish or a bad fish? Does that match your inspiration? Or can you maybe see some good in the clouds, some good in that experience? That's prayer. It's deciding what you're going to keep and what you're going to throw away, based on the high standard you had in your moment of inspiration, when you experienced the breath of the Almighty. 'Cause even reading a book, somebody else's thoughts that inspire you, is a good thing, because you're rising above your self-image in that moment. But it's like training wheels. If your spiritual inspiration depends on what you read, you're going to get to the end of that one of these days. You're going to get, the next book you pick up is going to say exactly what the last one said. And maybe some of you are experiencing that already. It's all the same thing. I don't read a lot of books. I go back to some old ones that I have that have been inspiring and kind of recenter my thought. But I don't think anyone can write about any new spiritual concept. I think it's all been said. So the next step after the inspiration, after reading somebody else's thoughts, is to go alone. As Jesus said, go into your inner closet, shut the door, and pray to the Father who is in secret. That's all about meditation. It's go away from the world and listen to that inner prompting. And you go and you listen, nothing happens. Go listen, nothing happens. Go listen, nothing happens. It goes on for a long time. Ask, seek, and knock. Didn't Jesus say that too? If it doesn't happen, nothing happens, just keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. You can't sit down and try to meditate for 5 minutes and your mind goes all over the place and say, well, I tried that once. I can't do it. I totally understand that, how difficult it is. But why do we want that experience? Why do we know we have this spiritual home? That's what we have to keep coming back to. I desire this greater freedom because I am created to be free. My soul is free. What I experience when I go by myself and read that inspirational passage, that's a piece of what I am. It's rising up out of the muck of my self-image, of my thoughts and feelings or whatever. Somebody else I've given control for a few moments of how I'm going to think because I'm reading their words. I'm following along. And I have an experience. It's inspiration, the breath of the Almighty. but it's not far enough. But use it if it works for now. It's the training wheels. So a good denial, and denial is a process. It's not words, so just keep that in mind. It's a releasing. You're thinking of somebody right now, for example. You can think of someone that made you angry, and you're sitting here thinking about them and you're angry. You can actually make yourself angry even though they live 500 miles away. So what is that? All that is energy. It's mental, emotional energy. So that's what we're releasing. I now release the energy of this negative appearance, whatever it could be, whatever it is. There's nothing to fear. And by releasing, if you have a handful of, if you have an apple in your hand, say, and somebody says, have you let that apple go? And you still have it in your hand, and you say, yeah. They say, it doesn't look like it. It's like you're still hanging on to it. What does it mean to release? It means you don't have it anymore. So to release something, to deny something, means you actually change the emotion of the anger, the fear, the reaction that you're having. You actually let that go. So it's not in your possession anymore. And you may, go along and say, yeah, I'd love to do that, but they don't deserve my love and joy and good wishes. Well, they probably don't. But you do. And that's what you're after. What you release in yourself has no effect on them whatsoever. But it has every effect, every impact on your experience. You don't have the apple in your hand anymore. You're free of it. You let it go. So I now release the energy of this negative appearance. I just wrote this out in this way as a general, it's releasing energy. And the energy is that emotion, that thought that you're having, that's unlike that inspiration you had reading the book. An affirmation is a remembering that part of you that rose up when you were reading in quiet by yourself. That which is in me is greater than that which is in the world. Don't you feel that way when you're reading your inspirational material? When you're lifted up, don't you feel greater? You feel there's something in you now that's greater than whatever it is you're confronted with in the world. I am fearless. You're fearless in that moment. The affirmation is bringing you back to that level. I'm filled with the understanding of what I am to do and how I am to do it. We don't have to know what to do or how to do it to affirm that we already know. The affirming aspect of it is what opens our mind to that. If we don't release all the negativity, we're not going to affirm, I know what to do and I'm doing it. We let that go, let the negative side go, the negative emotion, thought, the picture, all the stuff that we rehearse in our minds. What has that to do with me? And the me I'm speaking of is that one that I experienced in that high moment. And my affirmation is that which is in me is greater than that which is in the world. It's getting back to that high moment where you knew that. It's not words, it's a knowing. So throughout the day, as you go through your day, and the challenge presents itself, as it does, it will, maybe even harder, which is kind of weird. You release the negative energy you've invested in the challenge, and you allow yourself to experience it in a new and different way. So that's one stumbling block a lot of us run into, is we pray for something, we feel good about it, it seems like everything's just great, and then it shows its ugly head again. It gets very discouraging sometimes. And that's where we have to be mindful of this deeper something. And maybe there's something that experience is trying to tell us. So don't be afraid to look at that. Is there something I need to know here? Guidance comes in all kinds of strange ways. Song I wrote, all through the years I've taken some turns to places I don't understand. But it took every one to bring me here. I've been led by a soft, guiding hand. And I wrote that from experience. I don't understand everything that happens, and I wouldn't stand up here and tell you that I do. And whatever you're going through, I don't understand why you'd be going through it. And maybe you don't either. Maybe you don't need to. But what I do know is that these things have a way of causing us to reflect, to look, to ask, to seek, to knock, to know that something deeper is going on, because I am indestructible. I am eternal. And what is this blip on my road, on my path? Is it trying to tell me something? Don't linger too long there, because you can make up all kinds of stuff that you think is trying to tell you. But the bottom line is, we are already free at the deepest level. And how do we let that freedom out? You first touch it through meditation. You know it. Then you release the energy, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions that are contrary to that. And you affirm the truth that, yes, I am free. That which is in me is greater than that which is in the world. The power behind prayer is your understanding of your inseparable oneness with God, your unfailing source. So if you solve a problem or not, or solve it quickly or not, take your mind more off the problem and go for the experience. That inspiration you feel when you are at your best. That's the tip of the iceberg, and we want to find that. We want to get to that, and we want to deepen it. So we can walk through this world. When something happens, it's like it doesn't even matter. That's raising our consciousness. Okay, so we all have plenty of work to do, right? I know I do. I like doing this because I need this as much as anybody. You know, I'm going through a challenge right now, and I don't understand it totally. But it has revealed a lot of things to me that are important. I told God the other day, I said, you know, there's other ways you could do this. I'd be just as happy, I'm sure. And I just got the sense that there was a big smile. And so whatever. I'm showing up for it every day. So thank you for showing up, and hope you show up next week. Have every intention of showing up next week. So please be here.